Yeah, baby. More moves in the U-Haul truck. It is the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University, WilmU Works, Danny Pommells, Noah Levick, and Ben Berry coming to you live from Rivers Casino, Bet Rivers. We're right here on Delaware Avenue. Great view of the sports book. We got some MLK Day basketball going on. The Flyers just got smoked by the Bruins, but right now it's the Warriors and Wizards going at it, and it's good to see Steph Curry back on the court. Good to feel the off-day vibes that are floating around as everyone celebrates this Martin Luther King Day of service. I hope you are having a fruitful Martin Luther King Day. And Noah, the Sixers are West Coasting 2-0 here on this 5-game West Coast roadie. A great bounce back from that unfortunate just flat out lost to the OKC Thunder at home to end their homestand. But OKC has been beating almost everybody they've been playing recently. They just beat the Nets. They beat the Celtics a few weeks ago. We've seen them. I think they were 5-1 in their last 6 games the last time I checked. But Noah, how you feeling here as the Sixers are taking care of business on the West Coast? A little tired from staying up late. It's a time change, a little bit different. You're writing late into the wee hours of the morning.
Yeah, it's just an adjustment. Yeah, as we were talking about before, it sort of works for me because got the Australian Open on, so that is Sixers are a nice transitional material. Post work you get some good tennis, but yeah, the Sixers 2 wins by a grand margin of 2 points. And I think, honestly, there hasn't been some sort of dramatic defensive bounce back from that OKC game. There have been real defensive issues in both the wins over
Utah
and LA.
Lakers.
Yeah, but then kind of ironically, both games end with the Sixers playing really excellent defense on the final possession and getting the stops they needed to, and just being, I think, locked in down the stretch and showing this composure in situations where, man, it shouldn't be this close a game, but in terms of actually executing what they need, they're doing a pretty good job on that front. I think, obviously, James Harden's play in these fourth quarters is a massive bright spot.
Just his play in general, bro. I mean, you could tell his legs are back, man. The passes, just watching these last couple games, I kind of threw that at you a couple of podcasts ago about at their height, who has the better passing ability, Harden or Ben Simmons. It's no contest right now because Harden, bro, some of the passes he's made, he's averaging over 11 assists a game. He hasn't played enough games in order to lead the league. You have to play 58 out of 82. I looked it up. You have to play 58 out of 82 to qualify to be the assist leader. Once he meets the mark of games, he'll be well in the lead, at least at this point. I forget who's in the lead now, like 10 assists a game.
Halliburton, there you go. I believe, yeah. But James Harden, has a comfortable lead, once he gets the minimum. And then there's even kind of the weird loopholes of, if you would be leading, had you played 70% of the games, that still qualifies you. But should James Harden avoid any other major injuries, no need to worry about any of that.
But the passes, the shot making, the decision, the playmaking is just, I mean, he's turning back the clock a little bit, bro. He is fun to watch right now.
He is, yeah. I think in some subtle ways, the improved health and little more burst, you see how it makes his passing even greater. What stood out to me in the Lakers game was he was so effective time after time at getting downhill. And to him, that doesn't equate to bursting in for layups, but gets a step on a guy and it's game over. Guy's on his hip. He has that ability to vary pace, to manipulate, the low man with his eyes, to shield off his defender and find the angle he wants for the pass.
Lower the shoulder, the strength, all that's on display.
Yeah, right. His strength, I think, probably continues to be underrated, and he just knows how to use his physical tools so well, and the passing is downright brilliant. And it's funny, it seems like the norm now is Embiid, 12 or 14 points in the first quarter, James Harden, 5, 6, 7 assists. That's not a bad way to start games. Obviously, we'll get into how the discussion of the Sixers starting lineup and
yes,
that now being
interesting development,
an interesting change.
Yeah.
But in terms of their star talent, just very reliable production at beginning of games, and James Harden late in these games has been exactly what they needed, and I think been a huge reason they've avoided what would have been a disappointing loss or two. Again, to sub 500 teams. Not to say that Utah and LA are bad or untalented squads, but the Sixers were facing shorthanded versions of both teams, and they should have won both these games, and they just about did. And James Harden was obviously a massive, massive factor in that.
Yeah, Sixers tied and for third in the conference at 27-16. Just continuing to win when it matters on the road and take care of business. I wish they could have got that one against OKC. But let's start with the Utah game because you mentioned they were severely undermanned. No Kelly Olynyk, no Lauri Markkanen, no Colin Sexton. Rudy Gay was out. But the Sixers had a 20-point lead in the first quarter, put up 41 points in the first quarter. They're the most points in any first quarter this season. So that was really encouraging and just fun to watch, and some good takeaways from that game, and not just from James Harden, who was just really just on his toes and just, like you said, changing the pace and getting to the rim and colossal in the fourth quarter with the step back jumpers, just stepping into jumpers, 3-pointers at that. It was great to see Shake Milton and Tyrese Maxey got cold late, although he had hit 5 threes and was really stroking it from the outside. But Shake Milton, man, is just such an interesting character. I just feel like he has that a little bit of I don't know if regret is the word, but I feel like he's going to end up on some other team and ball out, and Sixers fans are going to be like, because there's nothing you can say because he's been here so long and we've appreciated a lot of things about him, but it just seems like he can only get spurts of opportunity rather than consistent, time, on the floor.
I will say, at least for now, Doc Rivers really likes him on the court next to Tyrese Maxey, and I think is comfortable with him as just a supplementary player who knows how to pick his spots, knows when the team needs him to be aggressive, and as we saw in Utah, is still capable of these scoring bursts that still tend to catch opponents off guard. I think it's funny too, just like thinking back over the years, you tune into a national broadcast or a road broadcast, and everyone knows, oh yeah, Shake Milton, this guy can score. We had 39 against the Clippers
Right.
coming up soon. But I think in terms of the Sixers' opponents, he's so often, of course, on the court with really talented guys who are the number one concern, and therefore, when Shake Milton is in that role where he can fly a little under the radar and let the game come to him and just play a natural flowing style, the results can sometimes be really good for the Sixers. Hit his first 5 shots in that game, was in a little bit of a slump from 3-point range.
Yeah.
But I think
a lot of front end, not the shots a little short.
Yeah, which has definitely become consistent with him when the shot is not dropping, usually is flat and short, but he got some good looks, knocked him down, and is really good at just figuring out what the team needs and providing it most of the time.
Underrated
I think, for the
athleticism, finishing.
I think so, yeah. I mean, Shake Milton's left hand is one of the better left hands in the NBA, I think, for a guard, non-dominant hands. Obviously, that is on scouting reports now, but he has this length, at 7 feet tall and really crafty as a finisher. And I think this year, during that stint where he was playing tons of minutes and the Sixers were shorthanded, you saw he's developed the left hand some as a passer, which is cool, and I think is another little level to his game that he's unlocked.
Wait, his wingspan is 7 feet?
Shake Milton, yeah. That was, coming out of SMU, that was one of the main reasons there was, optimism that he could be a decent defender or passable defender. And I think, to be fair,
I think Melton's is 6'9". So 7 feet for Shake. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, that's a big asset. And honestly, perhaps it hasn't panned out in an incredible way defensively. Right. I think, in my opinion, most of the time he's at least adequate as a defender. But man, as a finisher with both hands, I do think the 7-foot wingspan
that comes into play.
It's a big asset. So, and with Shake Milton, much of the time it's not going to be 39 points. It's going to be a little nice 14 off the bench or a nice contribution when maybe Maxey is struggling and the Sixers want him to carry a greater load. But I think the Jazz game was a reminder that, the Sixers have 4 legit rotational guards now, and all of them played well early in that game. And then late in the game, the Sixers just about managed to hold on, but were able to build a nice 20-point lead, and all four guards played a role in that.
Yeah, all four guards. And I'm trying to table the discussion about Doc Rivers and this rotation and these three starting lineups, which he mentioned after the Lakers game. So let's just kind of go chronologically a little bit. Yeah, and Milton, it just is fun watching him. It was fun watching him develop to this point, and it's fun seeing him when he's on the court, turning up, because it's so often, you're so much focused on Joel and Harden, and it's like you don't get the richness, like you said, that he's with so many other ball dominant, first choice guys on the court, that he's kind of just really playing a role out there. But when he gets his opportunities, it's like, oh, wait a minute, like kind of forgot about Shake in some ways. But it was just fun seeing him ball out against Utah. He played well against the Lakers as well, but they have another guard in Clarkson, who came out and kind of gave him the business a little bit on the heels of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander doing the same thing. I feel like I'm not as worried about those two performances. I wish that they would have performed better against OKC, but obviously with the guys that were out in Utah, you would expect Jordan Clarkson to come up and have a bunch of points. So I'm not really worried about that defensively. What are the areas that you're focused on? Is it the perimeter defense? Is it the team defense? What are the areas you're focused on defensively where you think they're having these lapses?
Yeah, I think I agree ultimately with the main self-criticism after the game, which is just too many times the ball is not being guarded especially well. But I do think some hat tipping is appropriate with Jordan Clarkson. Started cold from three, knocked down a couple in the fourth, but like the Sixers contested most of his jumpers
Yeah.
well. He hit some really tough mid-range shots.
And could have got some and ones on some of them, but
True, yeah.
didn't
The
go his way.
Sixers, I think, also at times foul excessively. I
Yeah.
think if you're looking at big picture issues with the team, that has been problematic. At times with PJ Tucker, at times with DeAnthony Melton, and I think they don't always do a great job of balancing aggression with just not conceding easy points to the opposition. Obviously, that's a well-known issue still for Matisse Thybulle. But yeah, I think you see the Sixers often like turning to zone defense in like the second quarter of games. And on one hand, I think it's encouraging that it's a viable option for them and they seem on the same page with the zone and have a decent idea of how they want to deploy it. But man, it feels to me like often they're going there because the man defense is just really ineffective. You look at that Lakers game, I think 30 of the first 36 LA points were in the paint.
Mm-hmm.
So again, the 3-point defense was good by the Sixers, but LeBron James was getting wherever he wanted to go at will.
Oh yeah.
And I think even some of the secondary guys for LA, including in transition last night, were having not too difficult a time reaching the paint and scoring there against the Sixers. So I think when Joel Embiid's off the floor, that's an obvious concern, just rim protection, paint defense. But even Embiid, I think, can't lift the Sixers defense to an elite level when on the ball is ineffective. When we're talking about these perimeter guys just allowing penetration time after time. I mean, we talked before about Doc Rivers is pretty steadfast with the base principle here is you go over the screen every single time.
Mm-hmm.
And Embiid will often be.
That's pretty fundamental, though. That's
it's the norm in the NBA, and the Sixers do mix it up occasionally, throw a blitz here or there when someone gets hot. But I think most of the time, these defenders on nights when they're giving up a lot of points are not super successful at getting over the screens, and then even just outside of the pick and roll on the ball, the isolation defense can be a little bit uneven. That said, we're still talking about a team that is in the upper level of the NBA defensively and is just looking for greater consistency. And now one of the big questions is whether they can get that consistency while tinkering with their starting lineups, as Doc Rivers says he plans to.
Before we kind of put a pin in the Utah game and talk a little bit more about the Lakers game, Tobias Harris wasn't in the Utah game. banged his knee up a little bit in the, which is honestly kind of scary when you saw it in the OKC game because he was down on the floor. The whole team came off the bench to kind of see what was going on with him, and he ended up walking off on his own. So, and he came back against the Lakers, so that was good to see. But because Tobias didn't play against the Jazz, that meant Jock had to go a little bit deeper into his bench. Matisse Thybulle, once again, playing 20 or more minutes. The Sixers win for the 10th time this season, 10-0 when Matisse plays 20 or more minutes. So, speaking to your defensive point, is there something there that they need to explore more? Are you seeing something different from the defense when Matisse is out there? Yeah, it's a softball type of question, but you do see something different. But is it something that can directly relate to them winning games when Matisse is out there on the floor, as the stat indicates?
I think it's still tricky at times to figure out the right moments to use him.
They kind of were forced into it against Utah.
Yes,
but
and
still,
it
was out in their favor.
Yeah, and it was a mixed bag for him against Clarkson. Noah, and I think neutralized him. And I think with Matisse Thybulle, you just have to remind yourself that he has, in my view, greatly improved his on-ball defense. And you look at like the defensive field goal percentage sort of stats, they're usually quite good. That said, his forte is still gambling, still being disruptive and hunting things down off the ball and making these fantastic recoveries. Inevitably, there are going to be some mistakes in his game and times where he frustrates the coaches or puts his teammates in vulnerable positions because he's just leaning a little too far in that aggressive direction. So I don't think it's often just a default, oh yeah, Thybulle deserves to play 25, 30 minutes here. I think, of course, a lot of that still rides on, one, is he effective offensively, and two, is he at least meriting respect as a shooter? But yeah, Matisse Thybulle playing more minutes and continuing to be a key member of this rotation. Not something I personally feel compelled to argue against at this stage. But I don't think it makes a lot of sense to me to say, Thybulle is quite obviously deserving of 25 plus minutes a night. I don't think I can quite get there just because even on these games where the plus minus might look nice or he might make a few highlights or make a couple of momentum turning plays, the reliability, I think, is still an issue. And like, I get it, as a coaching staff, you want to know that if you put this guy in a star scorer, he's going to be solid, and perhaps he'll add a couple highlights. Whereas for Matisse Thybulle, I think the risk of, a frustrating foul or an unwise gamble, it's still high, and it's still a core part of his game. So he is an extremely unique player, and I think that continues to make it difficult at times to figure out just exactly how to employ him. That said, yeah, I'm not opposed at all to him being in this rotation over House and Korkmaz, and him on some nights playing really significant minutes for the Sixers.
Trying to make sense of that stat with Matisse Thybulle. I personally am also trying to make sense of the stat that the Sixers are top 5 in the NBA in fourth quarter point differential. Now, how does that? How should fans absorb that and use that as a feather in their cap when they're talking to other fans of other teams? They're like, wait, we're top 5 in fourth quarter point. How do you use that and weaponize that when you're like trying to figure out if your team is elite or not?
Honestly, I think for the Sixers, just looking at the context of that, it is a little more valid as a confidence booster than it might be for some other teams.
Mm-hmm.
I think number one, just focus wise in regular season games, there's no question that both teams are trying hard in the clutch and,
Right.
when the game is on the line, and the Sixers have fared well in those situations. I think number two, just the point I made earlier, which is a little more intangible, is in these back and forth topsy-turvy games where maybe the Sixers blow a lead, maybe they make a comeback, they find themselves in a close game, and they're usually playing very good basketball and doing what's necessary to win it. But man, I just think the top level talent is excellent here, and it's clicking late in games. I think Joel Embiid continues to make some head scratching choices at times. Even in the LA game, just settling for 14, 15-foot jumpers when he obviously was capable of putting more pressure on that defense. But that said, James Harden, I think, has been brilliant in quite a few fourth quarters. And
Fun to watch, man.
yeah, Embiid just at the nail where it's hard to double him, and the opposition in some way needs to rely on single coverage. You just go with Joel Embiid every time.
Bro, they give him that shot. I know it's on the scouting report. I know they know that he likes that foul line jumper, but time and time again, he can step right into it and shoot that thing. I guess you would rather him shoot that 15-footer than shoot 3 feet from the basket.
Right, and I think most definitely rather than foul him. I think that is the very top of the scouting report.
Gotcha.
You hear like coaches, come into Philly and talk about guarding the Sixers. It's always, we have to show our hands and not foul. And I think, of course, late in games, you don't want to lose for that reason. So Embiid does occasionally get a little bit of cushion and the opportunity to knock down that shot. And there's a lot more variety, of course, to his mid-range game than there was a couple of years ago. So I think you always know he's able to get it off. He's often able to make it. And it's just really nice that the Sixers have found that spot for him late in games where, though his decision-making hasn't been flawless, I think at least his reads are usually not that tricky from the foul line. Sees where everyone is, sees the double team coming, and if he needs to give up the ball, he's happy to do so. And the Sixers have usually been decent, in the subsequent play, after those Joel Embiid passes. So, yeah, I won't read incredibly deeply into the, good point differential in the fourth quarter, some of the good clutch wins, but I don't think it's nothing. I think we got a decent sample size here, and I think you dive a little deeper into why those numbers are good, and yeah, legit reason for encouragement. The Sixers stars have led them to perform very well in close games.
We'll dive a little deeper into this West Coast road trip and this Lakers game more specifically. Doc Rivers talking about this starting five rotation that is going to be changing, so be aware of that. But before we do, we're sponsored by Wilmington University. WilmU Works. Learn how you can save time and tuition dollars with Wilmington University Dual Credit Advantage. Go to wilmu.edu/dual credit. And of course, we are here at Rivers Casino. Make sure you bet Rivers. It's time to rush to new rewards at Rivers Casino. Now there's a whole new way for you to earn, redeem, and level up your rewards. Get your new Rush Rewards card and get more out of your game at Rivers Casino, Philadelphia. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Noah, you a West Coast guy? You like the West Coast? You ever dibble-dabble out there?
I've been a couple times. Yeah, I've been my mom's best friend in LA. We went out to visit a couple of times. Actually, cool. Weaved that into a Phillies trip, which was cool. Dodger cool. Stadium, AT&T Park.
I haven't been to Chavez Ravine. I want to go back.
It's worth it. Yeah, it's an elite park for sure. And then back in college for a debate tournament at Stanford, which was, a beautiful campus and a cool experience. So, and not opposed at all to the West Coast. I won't have any strong takes on which is the best coast. Okay. Obviously, I have been exposed much more to the East, but the West has a lot that's attractive about it.
Yeah, I lived out there for 3.5 years. What's not to like, right? It's a dope place to be, and hopefully the Sixers continue winning out there. And I don't know if you having been around the game for a while now, I don't know if fans out there appreciated enough what we saw last night, but Mr. 38,000 points, LeBron James, only two guys have ever done it, and him and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So it just gives you an idea of the significance basketball-wise, NBA-wise, of what LeBron was able to accomplish. And you mentioned he came out cooking last night. It was like to the basket, the jumpers. He wanted to get that out of the way early, and he got a quick 12 points there in that first quarter. I thought Coach Lynham, who I always lean on for a great NBA perspective, and he's so lucid and, just such a fun guy to be around with all his little idiosyncrasies. But he made a point on postgame that, and he definitely likes to preface a lot of things he says with all due respect, because I know he respects and loves the game. He said, with all due respect, I watched Michael Jordan, which many of us did when he was LeBron's age and reaching that upper echelon of the NBA scoring marks and whatnot. he wasn't playing like that. He wasn't playing like LeBron with the pirouette layups and the transition threes and catching oops and all. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like you got to really appreciate and soak in what LeBron is doing out here. And my daughter, she was like, "Oh, like I didn't know, Bronny has another 2 years before he can get to the NBA." And LeBron's gonna have to hang around for a while. I'm like, I'm not even worried about. I don't even think that's even a question of LeBron being around in 2-3 years to be able to play with his son or against him. So let's get that out of the way. The 38,000 points. I'm sure you spent maybe a moment or two reflecting on all that meant.
Yeah, I guess for me, I thought back to 20 years ago, which makes me feel old watching LeBron James as a rookie.
Straight up. And
when he
Allah was reflecting on that too, just saying how when he first saw LeBron in his rookie year, 6'8", 255, like, man, like this dude's body is like at 21, like looks like real NBA, you know what I'm saying, like a serious situation.
and
Yeah.
he gained plenty of strength from there. But
Right.
yeah, I remember I think he scored 38 in Philly his rookie year, including one or two dunks that, at least to me, weren't like anything I'd ever seen before.
Mhm.
And obviously, even the casual fan could tell that this was a special player. But yeah, started 8 for 9 in that game. And you speak of the James Harden throwback. I think there was some LeBron James throwback action too, although this is not too outside the norm for him in terms of
Wow. Unbelievable to say that.
still
Yeah.
scoring 30 plus points at 38 years old. And
The Lakers do suck as a team, but he's doing well.
yes, yeah. I mean, the Lakers' success as a team is usually because of number 23. Yeah, but just a brilliant career. Obviously, it's funny writing it down like 18-time All-Star. It's like usually you look up how many times someone is an All-Star if you want to, maybe refer to that in a story, and you're not looking and seeing 18 times very often.
Right.
And I think unlike some players, like every single year, that has been legit. He has been worthy of an All-Star appearance, and just so great at manipulating the game and getting exactly what he wants. And hard to imagine we ever see anyone exactly like this again in terms of the skill level, the passing talent, the incredible size and athleticism, and it just,
Durability. Yeah.
yeah. And I know for me, I probably have taken a lot of it for granted over the years, and it's just, oh, that's who LeBron James is, and that's the deal. But certainly a lot of appreciating his career now as more and more milestones fall. So yeah, the Sixers were a part of that, but as you said, got it over with early, and then the question was whether LeBron could lead the Anthony Davis-less Lakers to a win, and he was not able. The Sixers actually didn't allow him to do too much damage down the stretch. That Tobias Harris did a solid job in a few possessions. Sixers threw in a couple of blitzes, one of which LeBron discarded. PJ Tucker and Montrezl Harrell just swiftly split them and this rapid fire spin move. But at least he did not, hero ball the Lakers to victory. So I think that's a nice silver lining for the Sixers, despite allowing 35 points to a really fantastic player, and one that many will argue is the greatest of all time.
Bro, let's talk about that, because LeBron not leading them to victory is really what everyone is talking about today, because Joel and the Sixers come down and get a bucket. They need a stop to get the win. It's 10 seconds on the clock, no timeout. Russell Westbrook decides it's time to go one-on-one. LeBron's hanging around on the perimeter. Here's Joel Embiid. Kind of him and Westbrook, they have definitely clashed and bumped heads, although there was a little love tap at the end of the game, which I noticed and I thought was interesting, because it was more like Westbrook initiating it, coming over and patting Embiid on the butt. But LeBron doesn't touch the ball at all down the stretch. Westbrook goes one-on-one against Embiid. Embiid stands tall, doesn't foul him, although Westbrook said he did after the game. And Westbrook has some ridiculous pass shot attempt that just goes awry. The Sixers end up winning it. But how the Lakers, Darvin Ham, and then defends the fact that he didn't call a timeout and didn't try to set something up for LeBron by saying he would do that every day and twice on Sundays, that's the type of talk that kind of gets you run out of town to me, because I just thought that was poor judgment. I don't know. I mean, come on, man. You got to kind of set something up. And particularly with the way Russ has struggled, it just didn't seem like it would bear fruit for the Lakers, and it didn't. And then to double down on it after the game, saying that that was the perfect call, I thought was stupid. But
I hear you. Yeah. So I do think, to give him a little credit, it was off a miss by Joel Embiid. So it was 113-109 Sixers. Troy Brown makes a three. Embiid misses a fadeaway jumper, which definitely falls into that settling category. So at least it's live ball. It's like a cross match. Maybe Russ can go downhill in transition, but
he didn't quite have it. He kind of lost the ball.
He sizes him up, and exactly for me at that moment where he loses the ball and doesn't have any real momentum or clear advantage, there's still 6-7 seconds left. It's obviously a tough call in the moment, but that feels to me like a good spot to call a timeout and say, all right, didn't have anything in transition there. Let's draw something up and make sure LeBron James is touching this basketball. Of course, Russ, did a lot well, as he often does, 20-point triple-double. But yeah, I understand to an extent letting him roll in transition and liking the look of a guard versus a big man, but Joel Embiid is a lot sturdier in that spot than many other big men around the league. And obviously, when the Sixers see that, they're going to be aware that Russell Westbrook is most threatening as a driver. So sure enough, he tries to go baseline on Embiid, and George Niang makes a nice rotation, gets his hands on the ball near the rim, and the Sixers escape with the win. So definitely a tough job that Darvin Ham has had in year one. A lot of injuries and just a lot of tough decisions. One of them obviously being Russell Westbrook off the bench. And do not think that was his finest moment. Obviously, any coach is going to be judged harshly when the late game decisions go awry. But I think even the process there of not recognizing that it wasn't a good situation, to me, yeah, that's fair enough criticism. Like, I understand a little bit. Let's see if there's something there. When it's not there, I think call that timeout. And if he'd done so, perhaps the Sixers don't win this game.
So they lose the game against OKC on Thursday. They come out and catch the Jazz on the second half of a back-to-back. On the first half of a back-to-back for the Sixers, then the Sixers go to LA right after Utah. They just flew across country, and Doc Rivers made this point in the postgame about how they tried to get the schedule changed when they first came out, because he's like, I'm sure it's happened, but we had to fly from east to west and then play a back-to-back once we get there. He was like, he tried to get the schedule changed. TV issues made that null and void. But then he drops this quasi bombshell after they go 2-0 at the start of this West Coast road trip, that you're going to see 2 or 3 different starting lineups from him here down the stretch in the second half of the season. And just by discernment, those 2 or 3 starting lineups would be Maxey coming off the bench, like we saw against LA with Milton starting in the backcourt with James Harden, Maxey starting and Milton coming off the bench, and then probably Tucker and Embiid in the front court, and having Maxey, Melton, and Harden in the 3-guard rotation. Is that right? Was those the 3 starting lineups you're thinking that he's referencing, or?
So yeah, I think I agree.
Like the smaller lineup.
Yes.
Maxey as the 6th man or Melton as the 6th man would be the 3.
Yeah, I think that would make sense. I think also, obviously, like Melton starting in place of Tucker and going small in that way.
Oh, wait.
Could also make sense.
And Tobias Harris
as your 4.
Okay, got you. Okay.
But we shall see.
Right.
There's still a little mystery here.
Yeah.
I think clearly.
Did that surprise you?
Did not surprise me.
Okay.
I think I'd referenced
just to vocalize it, to me, surprised me.
Yeah, definitely a degree of openness that isn't the norm. But he'd talked about not loving the opening night starters defensively, and having some real questions there. And I think when he said that, it was fair to assume that the backcourt defense was the
I was
concern.
just about to say, is that Harden and Maxey that he's specifically
I think
referencing?
basically, yeah. And like James Harden's going to start every game. Tyrese Maxey is a young player who's still got some things to learn, and D'Anthony Milton has been downright excellent at times in the starting lineup. So I think it was clear that that was under serious consideration, and sure enough, it now is in the mix in a firmer way. But I understand Rivers wanting to have various options and not feeling like the five they started the season with need to be the no-brainer starting lineup every night. So that's going to be a big trend to track, of course. What the various numbers are with those lineups, and
Who they trot which lineup out against, and
yeah,
matchups,
and of course, like who closes games.
right.
Milton started, but did not play the final 18 minutes or so, whereas Tyrese Maxey played 33 minutes and gave the Sixers a big bucket late in this one when he swiftly drove middle and threw down quite the lefty dunk. I think in situations where the Sixers feel okay about the defense with Maxey on the floor, then in all likelihood he's going to be the closer. But D'Anthony Milton obviously brings a ton of great stuff to the table. And then, yeah, I think the big lingering question here is what this means for PJ Tucker. We've seen certainly that there's a willingness to not include him in closing lineups. George Niang played the final 8 minutes last night over Tucker, but is Tucker indeed sometimes coming off the bench to start games? And, if so, are the 3-guard lineups at least good enough defensively when they do not include, PJ Tucker? So, yeah, those are some of the big questions that will perhaps be answered here. Of course, it's all contingent on sustained health, and the Sixers are hoping they get that, and that therefore there's opportunities to collect some valuable data and gather a decent feel of whether this, multi-starting lineup concept is one that makes sense for them. But just kind of big picture, I think it's sensible. And yeah, not shocking for me, just given the expressed concerns about the defense with the original starters, and then also the subplot that's been there much of the season, just with PJ Tucker not closing many games, and the reason for that being overall he's had a disappointing season.
If you're injured, for over 70 years, Lundy Law has been the #1 personal injury law firm in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Their services are exemplary. Their results are exceptional. Call 1-800-LUNDY-LAW to get the money you deserve. Opioid addiction is a national public health crisis. The Someone You Know podcast from the Independence Blue Cross Foundation offers inspiring stories that challenge stigma, offer hope, and humanizes the disease of addiction. Download the new season 3 of Someone You Know on all major podcast platforms. Hey, we're live here from Rivers Casino right on Delaware Avenue. A lot of people here taking in the MLK extravaganza that's going on in the NBA, and the craps table is packed, as I can see it here, 2 or 3 deep there. A lot of people leaning and placing bets and, doing what people do here at casinos. One thing Doc Rivers said, which I feel like is a giant stigma in basketball, is that it's not who starts, it's who closes the game. And so many people get caught up in the starting lineup. And I can even admit that I have fallen prey to that. Is that, you think about, oh, why isn't such and such on the floor? Or I don't like that guy and this guy should be in. And what they should do is move it around like this. But what matters is winning. And what matters is who's going to help you do that in the guts of the game. And who doesn't want to be out there in the clutch when the stakes are the highest and there's a moment for you to kind of be seen in that way, to be, valued and on the floor when it matters most. So I think that's just a giant basketball stigma. You know what I'm saying? It's like you get so caught up, and I'm a starter, but and the thing I think that like shined the light the brightest for me on that was when old point guard Jason Williams would be doing all types of highlight reel stuff for the Kings, and just he just took over. He was just like the player to watch for a while in the NBA. But he would be on the bench come crunch time for like Bobby Jackson or Doug Christie or whoever was in the moment there that they felt could help them win the game. And I remember watching one Kings game back in the day, and in the game he was on the bench in the fourth quarter, maybe the last 5 to 8 minutes. And then they went to overtime. He still didn't play, even though he was the guy that everyone came to see or hoping, he would pull some crazy pass out of his back pocket. So I think it's just a basketball stigma that sometimes is hard to overcome of, seeing who's on the floor at the start of the game rather than what's most important, who's on the floor at the end.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to that. I think some players actually prefer coming off the bench and not necessarily closing games. Like you hear Montrezl Harrell say that Lou Williams was big on, the bench role isn't something you should be insulted by, and actually it gives you an advantage because you can see how the game's unfolding.
That's a super mature perspective.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think some guys grow to like that. Obviously, Manu Ginobili's, the ultimate sixth man example.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, there's what you say with the whole killer instinct, liking the spotlight sort of mentality that is preferable late in games. I think we've seen flashes of that in Tyrese Maxey, and there's reason to believe that he gets a big shot or the ball's in his hands in the clutch, and he's going to enjoy that, and he's not going to shy away from the moment. So yeah, everyone's different, I think, in those situations. And then I think also there's just certain strategic nuances late in games where it's inevitably treated more like the postseason, and teams are really intentional about picking on an opponent's weaknesses. So, on the flip side with Maxey, that is sometimes a concern. Is the opponent just going to over and over see the Sixers are, let's say switching 1 through 4 in the pick and roll. So let's get our best player on Tyrese Maxey and go to work against him. These are questions that Maxey hopes he can, answer convincingly. But there's the personality and attitude layer, and then there's also just the strategic layer of all that goes into late game situations. I do think like the beginnings of games are entirely worthless in terms of which lineups you go to.
Absolutely not. Right.
Clearly, starting the game off with a 10-15 point lead is awesome, and some guys are good at that, just coming out with the right energy, the right focus, providing kind of what you're looking for from that standpoint. Matisse Thybulle, I think, arguably, would check those boxes. He's showed a propensity to start games, and maybe the opposing scorer is trying to get into his rhythm, and Thybulle's not going to allow that. He's got to be really disruptive. He's got to pick up a block and a steal. He's going to get the Sixers transition offense rolling. So there are really just circumstantial factors that, are tough to evaluate, I think, because there's obviously so much randomness, and you don't want to say, Thybulle started well in these 2 games, therefore that means he's got that right mindset to be a starter. But you try your best to pick those right lineups throughout the games, both the start, the close, and the large portion in the middle. But clearly the starters are something people care a lot about for good reason. And the closers absolutely.
Yeah, should care more about that in some like it.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I think I definitely would agree with that. I mean, if you make the wrong decision with your starting lineup, I think you can pull the plug and you can adjust a bit smoother than having the wrong guys out there defensively, and that blows up in your face and loses you a basketball game. There's just not that margin for error, and there's just not that remaining time to make right what you might have initially got wrong.
Or you let Russell Westbrook go 1-on-1 for the final shot it kind of backfires on you. But plenty of more fun games here on this West Coast road trip. So I hope you get your coffee, your espresso, your Monster energy drink, whatever it is that can keep you awake, so you can hang out with us and enjoy some of the Sixers basketball. Good one coming up with the Clippers, the Trailblazers. The Kings have been playing really well. That'll be fun. They got this light the beam thing. I don't know if you guys have been seeing that, where after every Kings game they shoot a big purple light into the sky, and Utah, what is it, Vivint Arena? What is it?
Yeah, so they are changing it back, actually.
Oh,
and that's a whole big story. They're changing it back to Delta Center. But yes, Vivint Arena.
But it was rocking. It was really incredible down the stretch. It was a couple of times you couldn't hear the whistle or the shot clock going off or whatever. So expect some of that for sure in Sacramento when they hit the court there. But make sure you're hanging out with the Sixers Talk podcast. Noah, what are you working on the website? What's popping there?
Yeah, so, just had observations on the two Sixers wins over the weekend, and more to come just on the West Coast trip, both single game, observations, and then some big picture stuff down the pike. And obviously we'll be watching closely on the various starting lineups. I think that's an intriguing little storyline here that we've got for ourselves, more than halfway into the season, but something to watch moving forward for the Sixers.
Do you have a trick or something you can tell the people to try to stay awake, or do you do something to?
I like a good midday nap. I think
you don't keep your feet in cold water or any of that type of stuff.
I haven't even considered that. Now I'm actually intrigued.
A midday nap is excellent.
But yeah, I think you can't go wrong with a nap, and you just kind of have to concede. Your rhythm of life is going to change a little when there's the West Coast trip, but hey, embrace it, and you'll get some dramatic Sixers games with very interesting finishes.
Very fun time to be a Sixers sports fan. Of course, the basketball is hot and heavy right now. MLK Day. There are two games going on right now. What is this? The Heat and the Hawks, and then the Wizards and the Warriors. A lot of alliteration there. I don't think they planned it that way, but nonetheless, enjoy the basketball. Enjoy your Sixers playing well. 27-15, not too shabby. 27-14?
16, I think. Yeah, we don't want to give them too much credit, but season high, I believe, with the 11 games over 500. And as we've talked about, the East standings.
27-16.
Yeah, East standings are super tight. So the Sixers, if they keep this up in the near future, you might see them as the second seed in the Eastern Conference. They're not that far away.
Don't get too excited, Sixers fans. A lot of more basketball to go, but the Sixers trending in the right direction. And we will be here every step of the way. For Ben Barry and Noah Levick, I'm Danny Pommells. We're brought to you by Wilmington University. WilMU Works. This has been the Sixers Talk Podcast. Take care.